Okay, well, I think it's time for us to begin. Welcome to our session. It's a delight to have all of you with us, and it's particularly a delight for me to have Marilyn Ahearn with us. Marilyn is on the faculty at Southern Cross University in the Gold Coast of Australia. She's got extensive leadership experience in primary education, including participation and leadership in environmental education initiatives. Marilyn's PhD research investigated the extent that teaching primary age students the scientific origin story of the universe may influence their values in sustainability. Her research involved developing and teaching a curriculum aligned to mandatory Australian outcomes for primary age students and was based on adapting the secondary-based Big History project. Her interest in research particularly investigate the insights Big History contributes to the concept of deep time alongside transdisciplinary and environmental education research in primary education. So thank you so much, Marilyn, for joining us. Thank you for all of us to be here at this time, and we'll just hand things over to Marilyn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lowell. Hi, everyone. I guess the title of my presentation, Connecting the Past, Present and Future, Big History in Primary Education, is indicative of my big history journey. I started in 2007, where I went to an ecological farm for a lovely sabbatical in the midst of a busy education career. And I was just absolutely entranced with this universe story I'd never heard of. And I decided the children at my school needed to hear about it. So I was struggling with it. And in 2010, when I was starting my PhD, I thought, I don't know, I was still struggling with some kind of platform because, as everyone knows, big history is so huge. And here I was, a primary school teacher, who was just learning the universe story. So it was fantastic when I came across the Big History Project for secondary schools, but I knew I had to adapt it then. So I had all this wonderful expertise from secondary schools, but I needed to adapt it for primary. So I started, doing that. My PhD really took shape, so it became a PhD in big history, which was fantastic. So I got that done. I fervently believe in big history in primary school. My findings showed that 8 to 9-year-olds could really grasp it and just loved it. They were in awe and wonder, and I was just amazed at what they learned. So I decided then I couldn't leave my study behind. So I went back 2 years later and did a bit more research. So by that stage, the children were in year 5, 10 to 11-year-olds. And once again, when I got to the door of the classroom, I couldn't believe it. It happened to be a glass door. And all of a sudden, these children were jumping up out of their chairs and pointing and, excitedly telling their teacher and other children who hadn't been in my class, that there was, the big history lady was back. And so I just was absolutely blown away by that. And the teacher said to me, absolutely amazing. I've never had that kind of, welcome. And I said, well, I never have either. It's big history. It's not me. So then they were so excited. They were so excited about it sorry, my partner's just here helping me with my script in case I need it. So anyway, we got ourselves going. Marissa, who is a big history teacher in the primary school in Australia, in Sydney, we got together eventually and decided that we also needed to develop a program that teachers in the primary school could use and adapt. So we used the Big History platform from the project there, and we adapted it for primary school. And we've done it, we had to tell the whole story. David Christian has been our mentor all along, and he kept on saying, whatever you do, tell the whole story. So that's what we did. And, it was really engendering that awe and wonder. So of course, they have a lot more to learn. So really, we have the Cool Australia is where we put our work up, and we only finished it, I think, last year. It took quite a bit of intensive writing, and we've got it, ready for teachers just to use as they like. It's all smartboard ready, so they can, adapt, delete, add whatever they like to it. So School Australia writers, Bob Regan from Big History Project, and especially David Christian, who's walked with Marissa and I through it all, have been very supportive of our work. So this session aims at applying my big history academic learning to practical learning in the classroom. As you can see there, I've written that up. So it's all from the primary school's perspective. And we found that year 5 to 6 need to start exactly where year 3 to 4 started, because we all say, oh, our children know so much, they can tell us so much about the universe, and they can go in. Some of them are just brilliant, but so far to date, the ones that we have found, our Australian children are very much up there, but we've still found that they really don't know that whole story, and that's what they're blown away with. So some stage we thought that we were, just thinking, oh no, the children already knew their work, and maybe, we just had to quickly learn the story, but that wasn't like that at all. Those children still found by the end of the course that they were saying it was the best thing they've ever done. So that was really great for us too. And you can see that cry there. Why hasn't anyone told us this before? Whenever I've been to any conferences, I've found whether it's tertiary, I've actually said to tertiary people and secondary-based people, it's amazing, the children are calling this catch cry, and they say exactly the same thing. Why hasn't anyone told us this before? So, I don't think we're aiming above our weight teaching them that. So I really just wanted to bring up this book. I don't know whether it's popular there or not, so it's Where. And Where Are You From? It's really the subtitle. And it's really a book about racism. But I just am going to read a little bit for you, just a few lines, just showing you that big history just permeates everything. And this is slam poetry as well. So it's poetry, so we can teach that to the children as well. This is where our transdisciplinary comes in. So I'm from the interior of collapsing stars, from the explosion that made the Big Bang and the iridescent glow of a nebula. I'm from the void and the cosmic dust around our solar system, on an express route of cataclysmic creation from the moons of Pluto and Saturn. I came straight from the center of the universe to the fires of suns of millions of light years away. I am from the mountains, the seas, and the sky. I am from the children of millions of years, a timeline of humanity. I am from this planet and all others. I am from the same place that you are. So I just think that's just a brilliant thing there. So, and this is one of David Christian's sayings that, has got me through a lot, that we just really need to be teaching the whole story, because we're just teaching it a fragmented way in so many ways. We've taught the planets, and yes, we teach wonderful science, we teach wonderful English and everything, but it really can be unified. And that's what my PhD was all about, and my work is all about too. So, and this hopefully will work. This is the reason. This is actually from a short video that David did with my colleague Marissa after he visited their school, and they'd just finished their work. The children had just finished their work. So here it is, if I can find it. I seem to have lost my. So that's just a few words from David. He was really impressed with what the primary school children were taking on board. And so now I'm going to, if I can find this again, I'm going to just play a short video. This is actually from a student's perspective. Oh no, sorry, I've just lost that now. Just see if I can find it. I didn't put my pointer on. So. So that was written and scripted by and performed, as you can see, by children. So that was what they knew. So I guess for me, the next thing is why choose Big History for primary aged learners. I think, for me, one of the important things about Big History is teacher as lead learner, because that's certainly what you need to be. We need to be using the expertise of so many different people from different areas of life. So therefore, it makes it child-centered. So they see themselves as coming in and being able to tell us something they've read or they've looked up with their parents. So it's absolutely wonderful. It's academically rigorous. It's a cohesive story relatable to primary school children as well. And now, if I can find this again, this is Emma, who's 9 years old at the time, this is what she said. No, hold on, sorry. I forgot to put this thing on. So here we go. So this is just framing my qualitative PhD story. It's at 8 to 9 year olds. Let me just read that quickly. So now it's just time to explore the 9 thresholds of Big History from the primary learner's perspective. And these following questions, all based on the thresholds from the Big History Project and from David Christian, of course. And each one had a driving question that I'm going to put up in a minute. This was really critical for the children to learn because we wanted them to be critical evidence-based learners. So this is one of the first things we taught them. This is from the Big History Project, for those who are familiar with it. And it's just that fact that if they look at all those and they knew them, they could just tell us straight away what they were using as a claim tester. And it was just, the important thing was it's a common and origin story, but it's changing. And that gave them permission then to come into the classroom and, tell us, like at one stage when I was teaching it earlier on, and, 13.7 billion years ago it was, and one child proudly came in one day and, and said, no, they've just found out it's 13.8 billion years ago. So, they were the ones who carried it through. It was absolutely brilliant. So the first threshold, the Big Bang, how do we understand where everything came from? So the linchpin here, which to awakening the awe and wonder, was the driving question or the inquiry question. And I think the great brilliant thing about this is that, can be adapted to fit in with your subject, your class, your school learning requirements. So to tackle this, scale, time, and space, they had to learn, look at it, try and learn a big picture. And we all know it's just impossible, really, to understand in our little human brains. So for the aspect of time, we had a rope. And you can see here, first of all, we started off with this circular idea, and trying to get the idea that everything's interconnected and we need past, present, and future, need to think about it all and go backwards and forwards. But 8 to 9 year olds really needed a linear line. So we ended up doing straight line. And then they got the whole idea. They could see the great gaps, and they were just amazed at the gaps between thresholds. And then how, humans came right at the end there. You see everything's all grouped. So I'm just going to show you, this one was a really fantastic video that the children really liked. I'm just going to play you a little snippet just in case you haven't seen it. And you'll notice down the bottom there, that starts off with 10 centimetres and then it went into kilometres. Then we've got to light years. That's where their little minds were starting to blow, because a lot of them hadn't heard of light years. And I'm sure we all know where it keeps going then. Okay, so then on to threshold 2. I think, this is really, this absolutely fascinated the children. I think for them, the first few thresholds were the most amazing, the whole universe idea. They're saying they had no idea this was all happening. So the example of the driving question that we used is, you can link it to local place. And I think this is where it's important. In Australia, our curriculum highlights the importance of stars to our Indigenous First Nations people and highlights their connection to the environment, to their land and their country. And many children who learn about big history are just also fascinated by the periodic table and the dying of the stars. And so they would come to school having learned about elements that, we hadn't picked up on. And, of course, they all we didn't bother teaching the element song because they just pick it up and go home. They'd all come back and singing it. So, it's a great start. They understand where the periodic table comes from. So there's threshold 4 with its driving question. An activity we used here was, I think with primary school children, you definitely need to get out and do a lot of physical things as well. So, one where I'm sure a lot of people who have taught secondary, the teacher's in the middle, as the sun, maybe with a whistle or something, and the children they know they're particles of dust or debris. And they move around until the teacher blows the whistle, they link arms with someone, then they move off again a few times, then they all sit down and they work out what kind of solar system, how many planets in their solar system, maybe there are a few asteroids, whatever. They discuss all that. So, and they remembered that when I went in 2 years later, that was one of the activities that they're excitedly telling me about. So then with life, with this one, this is just a couple of ones where we talked about the peppered moths, and they love that. The website there, an example of natural selection, it even had a game and it had not a worksheet, so a reading sheet there that they could read about it. And then they ended up making their own moths and putting them on different backgrounds. So that was just fantastic. And then this one, this is one that they remembered a couple of years later too. Where we talked about finches, the difference between them. Are they the same bird? Why do they look different? Because they came up with the beaks. And then they went on to this activity where they had to, down here, you'll see that these were what they're called, scissor bills, tweezer bills, spoon bills. And then they had a minute to each, so the tweezer bills, of course, with tweezers, had to try and pick up marbles, pipe cleaners, and then they had to discuss the results. So that was one thing they remembered. They called that a maths lesson actually at the end of the year, a couple of years later on, the transdisciplinary coming in again. So now on to early humans and what makes things different here. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. So this Smithsonian Institute one is one where the children love this site because this is where they could go into their own research. And this one is actually on musical instruments. And then I'd gone into the ancient flute, just to give you an example. So they could investigate big history through the Smithsonian Institute and what it means to be human. So on to agricultural and civilization. I think what was amazing here, that the children had actually grasped by this stage, they were actually talking about when we were picking berries. They were not when they were picking berries, but when we were picking berries. So they were identifying men, with all the humanity. And I thought that was just amazing. So this is just now an example of comprehension where they had to skim read meaning, reread, summarize. And then they compared with today's sustainable farming. So that you can imagine the research that just actually allowed, the children who wanted to move on further, they could actually do a lot more research there. So onto the modern revolution. And they just watched, they could, for instance, watch a video here. How many inventions could you remember in the video? what are some of today's videos? What would you like to be able to design as a great invention for you? So now onto the future. And this is where I'm going to use a bit more of the Cool Australia's website. As I mentioned earlier, the website is an environmental focused platform, and it's accessed by approximately 90% of Australian teachers. So that's why we wanted it up there, because big history in the primary school anywhere in the world seems to be a very small area. And so we thought, it was accessed. And I meant to look up the figures, but it was quite a number of teachers who had downloaded the units, and they worked out, and it had already reached, I forget how many children, but it was quite a significant amount of classes. So we were really delighted that they accepted. The big history units that Marissa and I developed are not just specific to Australian schools. Yes, they are. There might be a bit about the Australian curriculum in there, but really, after all, it's big history. So we go from local, wherever we are, to the universe. So, you can't just, we felt as though we just couldn't keep it at Australia. Australia is such a big country, so diverse anyway, like many of your countries. So each threshold is smartboard ready, and it contains resources for each one, suggested websites, etc., needed to complete the activities. So you're not worried about children having to search around and find websites that are too hard for them or whatever. So to us, that was really important as well. So at the end of each unit, so the thresholds, there's an actual area for each threshold where they can go in and have a look. But at the end of each unit, there's this question. It keeps just getting, put up, not really discussed much, but that's the question, big historians. And the call for sustainable cities and communities is there in goal 11. So the Sustainable Development Goals. So this now is just a little bit, you'll need to go into the site to have a look at the Cool Australia site. I've got the link at the end, but this is just to show you that there's quite, on the left-hand side, there's quite a bit of information. You scroll through a lot, and then Big History's version, they had to actually truncate it because they couldn't fit ours up onto the site, but they've actually got, I think it's just there, I can't really see it. Maybe I'll click here to view Marissa's and my actual PowerPoints, which the ones you can download and adapt yourself. And then that's just an example of the units you can click on. But remember, it's the whole story. I kept on saying that, children as well. We had learning intentions and success criteria for each unit. And then this was an example of one of the activities where this was in the future, and it was one of the culminating assessment areas. So they had to build their own city, thinking about what they'd learned. By that stage, they just introduced sustainability. It wasn't really a topic. It just came in and it just stayed there the whole time. They could just see it had to be sustainable for our world to keep moving on. So this introduced it, and it made it very exciting for the children. So the tasks here then, you can see that they were independent and collaborative. So that was really great, because children have different styles of learning, and they also could then come and discuss with the teacher if collaboration wasn't happening, and we all know that can happen in all our lives. So this is just the home group then. This is how, so they all started off in a group, and they all had they were a different expert: future energy, future housing, future transport, future green spaces. Then they went off into expert groups, and this was used in the smartboard slides, so just to explain to the children how it worked. This is where they got their expertise, each one of them. So the future transport experts had a smartboard slide that they could just click onto. It had videos and enough information for years 3 to 6 to be able to click onto, get their information, then go back to their home groups, and they were the expert in that. So then they could develop their smart city. So this now is the assessment process that we also have up. So we've got lots of information there, and even, sheets that you can use for assessment. This was the grasp technique, which some of you know, maybe some people haven't used it before. And then they had the task, they had the due date for each task that was discussed, they had to write it in, and then they had to tick when it was completed. And then it went on to the rubric, name their future sustainable city, their names, their group, and then each task then actually was named, and then they could rate themselves 4, 3, 2, 1 with the criteria. They had to give themselves a self-rating, and then the teacher gave them a rating. And this was for each unit of work as well, but especially for the last one. An overall rating, their own reflection on their sustainable future city, and then the teacher gave them comments as well. So this was the final assessment presentation. Over the years, here's a couple of examples. They had a big history museum where parents and other classes are invited in, and school community. And this is where David Christian came in a couple of years, I think. And another year they had Invent a Species and Big History Zoo. And one other year, I haven't got it here, but we had a sustainable, what was it? A sustainable marketplace, that's right. And so they actually linked Big History to sustainability. And they are just so excited with this kind of thing. And the parents are just blown away with what they know. So just a couple of last comments. This is from the children 2 years later. They were still saying things like this. And then Molly, once again, this is 2 years later. They were just, this is really indicative of what they were all saying. It was more, they learned more exciting things, and then she actually said, I actually didn't know anything about Big History before. And then Gabby agreed with it and said it was one of the more extraordinary topics. Once in a lifetime, you better take the opportunity. It's really exciting. So just, they're my implications for Big History that I see. Socio-ecological learning, and I think that's very important. Sustainable mindset. It's transdisciplinary. We use the Sustainability Atkinson's Sustainability Compass because it's simple for children, and they need to see that, it needs to be all embracing. We just can't look at nature or well-being. We need to look at everything together. So lastly, this is my impression, my current impression anyway. It keeps changing, this picture. You might see glimpses of my granddaughter there, my little granddaughter. So, really it's just Big History, entangling past, present and future. And it really is entangled, and with a wider worldview for sustainability. And they're, all what we need to glimpse at, some of the things anyway. The children were always amazed. There were a lot of ologies there. So here's the contact information. That's the Cool Australia website. But if you just Google Cool Australia Big History, it will come up with our work there. And if anybody wanted to get in touch with me, that's my email address at my Southern Cross University. So thanks, everyone.